League winners, breakouts. Yes, what's up? Welcome, everybody. It is Wednesday, April 3rd. Sleepers win you weeks. Breakouts win you leagues. TM. Welcome to the show. And we're talking about exciting players that could absolutely crush it this year. However you want to find, however you want to define a sleeper and a breakout. Breakouts tend to be more high-end players. So we'll be talking about, as Jamey said a few weeks ago, I think, receivers who are getting big quarterback upgrades. Garrett Wilson, Drake London, George Pickens. They're going to be on the list. Kyle Pitts also fits that description, except he obviously is not a wide receiver. Bijan Robinson was good last year. We're expecting him to be elite this year. So I have a tough role on today's show. I basically just have to play devil's advocate the entire time.
You don't have to.
No, we can't just
you don't. You really don't. We can have a breakout show where you don't.
You could force us to be the people who play devil's advocate.
Could do that, but I've already prepared my devil's advocate.
Good.
Here's the list that, based on the list you guys gave me of your breakouts, here are the ones that I think are the shared breakouts that I thought everyone agreed on.
I didn't think you were going to say shared there, but glad you did.
I don't know. I don't get that part. Okay.
Poop? You thought he was going to say poop?
Why would I say that? All right. Anyway, Anthony Richardson. Yeah, breakout.
By the way, I realized yesterday, Adam does not know how to check his mentions on Twitter or X, whatever you're calling it.
I do not. God, that was so frustrating. I was Jamey was texting me, and I was so mad at him. I was just like, just, you know the scene in Dumb and Dumber where he's trying to get the number and he's lighting himself on fire? And he goes, for God's sake, just give me the damn number. That's what was happening with Jamey. He was sending me these like cryptic texts that I was supposed to figure out.
No, so we got a pretty bad reply to Adam's podcast post from Monday's show from a handle from a movie. And I was just replied to him. I go, why'd you piss off the character? And I listed other characters from the same movie. And Adam's reply to me was, why are you sending me?
I'm not sure I get the references here. And then Jamey says Twitter. And I said, I'm stumped. Sorry. And he said, check your tweets. I said, I just did. And he wrote, and I wrote, I just have no idea what you're talking about. He wouldn't just send me the damn link to the tweet already. Anyway, let's get on to it. Someone had an absolutely ridiculous response to my tweet of yesterday, of Monday's podcast. It was ridiculous. And his name was a character from a movie, and Jamey really threw me off, and he's throwing me off here. So shared breakouts, Anthony Richardson, Bijan Robinson, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, George Pickens, Kyle Pitts. Yeah.
I think there was one Dave had too that I agree with. Zamir White. I agree with that one too.
I didn't put everybody's on my list, but I agree with most of them. I don't see any reason to disagree at all.
With Anthony Richardson, Bijan Robinson, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, George Pickens, Kyle Pitts. I mean, these are going to be popular industry-wide breakouts. Think so?
Most of them.
Yeah, I think until the draft, it's always a little challenging to find the true breakouts because there's going to be some situations where these rookies impact it one way or the other. You know, where there's some negative scenarios for these guys.
So how do we gain an advantage here if everyone has them on their breakouts list? Like, do you reach for these guys or just make sure you try to get two of them? Like, what do you do, Dave?
If they win you leagues, then yes, you reach for them.
Right. If you've got the conviction that these guys are going to put up career years and just absolutely annihilate other players that are drafted around them, then you take them. And you might take them half a round to a full round sooner than everybody else would. A little bit different in the case of Garrett Wilson. You might just put him 2 or 3 spots higher than consensus in your
and Bijan, it'd be hard to take him around higher.
Bijan, right? Like, if you really believe in Bijan, you might take him ahead of McCaffrey. It sounds silly right now, but the argument could be made. I don't know if I necessarily buy into it, but it could be made. And I guess that's what the point of this all is. It's just, what are the arguments that we can make? Every single person we've named so far is definitely a candidate to break out. It's just, what's the argument that would make you have that conviction to take them around earlier than ADP?
I think there's 3 guys you named that will get drafted maybe a little bit sooner than they should. Drake London is one, Kyle Pitts is another, and George Pickens is the third. I think all those guys have a potential to be drafted a little bit too soon.
So convince me that Garrett Wilson going at the beginning of the second round is not too soon.
Devontae Adams.
What he was able to accomplish with non-Zach Wilson quarterbacks
2 years ago
wasn't really that good, you know. I mean,
as a rookie.
Yeah, like
17 fantasy points a game.
Again, remember what I'm doing here is I'm playing.
But you don't have to.
No, I do, because I want to bring up the counterpoint, right? I mean, we got to have a show. We got to have some discussion here. I always brought this up, you know, in that sense, right? Like that you just said, what, 17 points per game? That's what he averaged as a rookie without Zach Wilson.
For a good portion of that, though, it was 21 points per game.
Right, but remember, they were throwing like 45 times a game or something like that, and he actually averaged more yards per target with Zach Wilson than without Zach Wilson that season. It wasn't like the quarterback play was so good. They just threw the ball so much. They're not going to do that with Rodgers.
Well, I think the point is it wasn't like the quarterback play was so good. Like the non-Zach Wilson quarterbacks have still mostly been not very good quarterbacks.
Yeah. Yeah, right. No, I know. He's got Mike Williams now. Actually, a big concern, and this will change the discussion. A big concern for me, I don't know if it's a big concern for you, is the Jets seem to want another wide receiver. If they take one, what do they have, the 10th pick? If they take one in the first round, would that change things for Garrett Wilson? But I guess I would say with Garrett Wilson and Drake London, they've had bad situations, but also they haven't been great, especially London.
If they had been great, then they wouldn't be as good of breakout candidates because they would have already broken out.
Sure, but they're being drafted. You know, Garrett Wilson is being drafted as if he has been great. Now, let me just say again, I would take him early in the second round. I think it makes sense. But I'm just pointing out, like, you look at a guy like A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown was playing on a team that barely threw the ball, and he was still absolutely unbelievable. You could say the same in some seasons, I would say, for DJ Moore, at least in terms of yards. It wasn't touchdowns, but he was still putting up a huge yardage. Wilson and London especially, have not done that yet. So I guess that is my forced counterpoint here.
Okay, to counter your counterpoint.
Yeah.
Nico Collins.
Absolutely. He's you know, the best example.
And not the same prospect as these guys. So these guys have the ability to, if they live up to their draft stock and what they were coming out of college, to be better than what Nico Collins was, who got a quarterback upgrade after 2 years of toiling with bad quarterback play and looked like a star. And so these guys have the ability to be stars.
Not only did he look like a star, he had the opportunity to play like a star. And that's just the other factor here. Garrett Wilson, terrible quarterback play last year, still had 10 targets per game. If he's getting 10 targets per game from Aaron Rodgers, he's going to be very good.
Oh, could be QB1. He's getting 170 targets.
Wide receiver one.
Yeah, sorry.
He throws for 40 touchdowns.
I think it's tougher. It's easier to say all this stuff about London because has he had a worse situation than Garrett Wilson? I mean, I don't know, but he's been worse.
Yeah, I would say he has.
He's equally bad quarterback play or close, but 150 fewer passes per season.
Right. Like that's also a play calling problem. That's the team trying to rally around its run game and be conservative and almost hide the quarterbacks. It's what we saw from the Jets a lot last year too. And still Garrett Wilson had that average. Last year it was 6.9 targets per game for Drake London. So if the targets per game goes up for him and the quality of target goes up for him, of course his numbers are going to go up and he'll have a career best fantasy point per game average. It's been terrible so far. He should be very good.
Also, yes, it's easier to make those arguments against Drake London, and that's why he's not being drafted in the second round.
But you missed our Joe Pisapia episode. Joe said he thinks he should be drafted in the second round.
I'm drafted in the second round.
Jamey's there now at the 2-3 turn. Honestly, it makes sense because as we discussed when I took Chris Olave early in the second round in a draft, once you get past Garrett Wilson and A.J. Brown and Puka Nacua, I don't know that there's a slam dunk wide receiver to go next. It'd be, I think, wide receiver 9. There's like this big vacuum early in the second round after those guys I mentioned come off the board. Which wide receiver goes there? And I actually do think Drake London has a pretty compelling case there, Heath. So no, right now he's not being taken in the second round, but but some people are considering it, I guess, at least 2 people that I respect a lot. And do you think that we, the industry could get there and ADP could get there for London?
I suppose it could, especially if it seems more and more like Kyle Pitts is not a focal point of the offense and it's Bijan and Drake London, and we just hear more and more of that steam. And then Cousins looks good at training camp, and he might creep into that end of round 2 early, like where Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle and T. Higgins were all sitting last year.
Okay, so let's wrap it up here with one question about all of our shared breakouts here. Anthony Richardson, give me some big name quarterbacks you would draft Richardson ahead of.
Herbert.
Yep.
Trevor Lawrence.
Yep. Tua.
Kyler. Purdy.
Yep.
Prescott?
No. All the old guys.
No.
Cousins, Stafford.
Prescott in 4 points for passing touchdowns.
All right. Bijan Robinson is RB blank.
3.
That's the one.
3.
Garrett Wilson.
Did you say that with a sigh, Heath? Like you're resigned to the fact that he's 3?
No, I have. I think I actually have Kyron projected just a little bit higher, but I would draft Bijan higher because I think he's a lot better player. But Kyron could. I mean, if Kyron's RB3, it won't surprise me.
And I'm banking on the Falcons like being smarter with their play calling this year.
Matt Weber's asking who's RB2. That would be Breece Hall. Garrett Wilson or AJ Brown?
Brown, but I go back and forth with this one.
They're back to back.
Drake London or the old guys who showed decline last year, Stefon Diggs, Devontae Adams?
London.
I'll take the old guys as of now.
Old guys.
George Pickens or DK Metcalf?
Pickens.
I have Metcalf 1 spot ahead of George Pickens.
And Kyle Pitts is tight end blank.
7 for now.
I also have Met 7.
7.
So that's behind Kincaid?
Yes.
That's ahead of Kincaid for me.
Who's 6 for you, Heath?
Kittle.
Who's 5 for you, Heath?
Ingram.
There. Okay.
Who's 5 for you, Dave?
5 for me is Kincaid. Kittle is 6th. Pitts is 7th. Ingram is literally 1 spot behind him in the overall rankings at 8. And I have it that way because I think you can get Ingram after Pitts in your fantasy drafts. And it wouldn't surprise me in the least if Ingram was better than Pitts in full PPR.
All right. Listen, NFL draft time. It is April. We're about 4 weeks away. Not even. So, we're like 3 weeks away. All right. We're getting there. So check out FFT Dynasty. Heath is bringing on great guests who have broken down the film and are giving us terrific insights on every position here, all the rookies that are coming into the draft and who's going to make big fantasy impacts in their first year. Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. You can follow it, listen to it anywhere you're listening to this podcast. And the episodes are on Tuesdays and Fridays. You can also watch it live or on demand at youtube.com/fantasyfootballtoday. We're going to take a break. We got some news. I got a rookie quarterback stat for you, and then we'll get into all of the breakouts, including Devon Achane, Tank Dell, Dalton Kincaid, Zamir White, Zach Moss, all after this.
Last dance.
I shall follow your lead.
We're on a search for one of the greatest powers ever known. Let's fly.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have to start with the sad news and our condolences to the family and the friends of Vontae Davis, former cornerback for several NFL teams and really great college player and great NFL cornerback. Vontae Davis passed away at the age of 35. So sorry to hear it. The Chiefs made a couple of signings. They re-signed Clyde Edwards-Helaire to a 1-year deal, and they signed Carson Wentz as he's going to get a chance to compete in training camp. No, Carson Wentz going to be their backup.
What?
No. Clyde, is Clyde a handcuff? And we don't really talk about handcuffing Pacheco, but Clyde.
It's interesting that they signed him after they kicked the tires on J.K. Dobbins, and they haven't done the same thing with Jerick McKinnon yet. So I think that's an unfinished room for Kansas City, but yeah, I think it means something that they brought CEH back.
I mean, he was basically handcuffed when Pacheco had the neck injury last year, so I don't see why he wouldn't be the handcuff now.
And I wonder I wonder if this just means that Dobbins, who's now toured 2 teams in the AFC West, is still unsigned.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't love that.
Baltimore head coach John Harbaugh said that the offense will look different in 2024. What do you take that to mean?
Didn't he say something like that before 2023? I mean, obviously with the play caller change. And at times it did look different. I can give my conjecture, but I don't know exactly what that means.
I mean, I would anticipate, first off, there's some offensive line changes that, he could just be referencing.
Sure.
There's, a change in the receiving core, no Beckham. We've talked about this a lot. Do they run some more 2 tight end sets, and
That's
right. Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews run the field more together to open things up, from a different perspective. But this is a team I think also you got to keep an eye on for drafting a wide receiver as well. I mean, this is a group that has had one underwhelming first round pick in Rashad Bateman, and Zay Flowers, who knows exactly what he'll become, but I wouldn't be surprised if they come away with a receiver or 2 in the NFL draft at some point. Not a first round pick, but somewhere in the middle of the draft, they come out with a couple of guys. They've done that before.
I hope it means they're going to play both their tight ends and both their running backs at the same time. Like get Keaton Mitchell, Derrick Henry, Likely, and Mark Andrews all in the field with Lamar Jackson at the same time. One wide receiver sets.
Well, I think there's this perception out there that the Ravens threw the ball more last year with a new offensive coordinator. They were last in the NFL in pass rate, and they had the second fewest pass attempts in football. Only San Francisco, which had 3 fewer. Tennessee and Baltimore had 494 pass attempts. San Francisco had 491. So I don't know really what changed. They were great, but they still were very run heavy. And then the Colts re-signed safety Julian Blackmon, who was a pretty important player for them last year. There was an article on CBSSports.com that looked at the 46 quarterbacks who have been selected in the first round over the last 15 years. And they gave incompletes to everyone from last year. So Young, even Stroud. I'm pretty sure he got an incomplete. But they graded them home runs. Home runs would include Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes. I didn't agree with all of the grades. Solid result. I think Justin Herbert was in solid result. Tua was in solid result. Mixed result. Like mixed result was like Daniel Jones was in mixed result. I would have given him a miss.
Where's Trevor Lawrence?
I think solid result. I think. And then Deshaun Watson was in mixed result, I believe, and I would have given him a solid result or a home run. I mean, he was so good with Houston, but look, we can quibble over the results. One of our writers, he kept saying we. I forgot who it was. So I don't know if it was a team effort, but it was on our website. Anyway, they looked at 46 quarterbacks. They gave home run, solid result, mixed result, incomplete, and miss.
And these are first-round quarterbacks?
First-round quarterbacks.
There were only 3 first-round quarterbacks last year.
Yeah, okay, right. So they
15 years, Dave.
They all got incomplete. I don't know who the other
was the fourth to get an incomplete.
I'm not sure. Who was from 2 years ago? Maybe it was someone from 2 years ago.
I'm looking this up right now. It was Cody Benjamin.
Okay. He's the guy who wrote it. He's not the quarterback.
What?
He's the guy who wrote the article. He's not the quarterback who got the incomplete. I got to give the big takeaway. 50% of the first round quarterbacks were misses. So much bigger than any other.
It was Jordan Love.
Oh, he may have been incomplete. Oh, is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Jordan Love. That makes sense. So, you're going to get maybe 5 quarterbacks in the first round. You could get 4 in the top 5. Last year was pretty damn good, I'd have to say. I mean, even if it was just 2 out of 3, depending on how you view Richardson. But they're not all going to be good. That's for sure.
No, especially if there's going to be 5 of them taken. There might only be 2 that are good.
Yeah, and then you got to wonder, like, if you're in a dynasty league and you're doing a rookie draft, even if it's super flex, Caleb Williams seems like he's in his own level, but should the next 3 picks be wide receivers?
No.
Depends on what you need.
Exactly.
But obviously, it's like anything. I mean, you're going to take chances on the position that matters the most. You could probably do this with every position. How many misses have there been? Jalen Reagor went one spot ahead of Justin Jefferson.
I bet you, but I bet you, well, I don't know, because there was that stretch where we had like really bad first round wide receivers, right? We had,
that's what I'm saying. Are you?
I just feel like quarterback has more misses than receiver would be my guess, especially 10.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a similar percentage would be my guess. If you really broke it down, there's obviously going to be more receivers taken than quarterbacks. So I would think it changes a little bit, but I mean, when you're doing these drafts, you have to take these chances.
I mean, last year there were 4 JSN, Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers, and Jordan Addison.
Yeah, but notably, none of them were drafted in the top 20, or what was the first one? 20, 19, something like that. You're not talking about the 3 guys who are going to get drafted in the top 10-ish this year. So I'm just wondering if those guys are safer. They probably are safer. Are they worth drafting over Drake May, for example? Whoever goes to New England.
Well, over whoever goes to New England, I would say yes.
Yeah. All right.
But that's the way the draft will unfold, though.
Let's hope Drake May's in Minnesota.
Food for thought. All right, back to the breakouts. Jamey's list is Anthony Richardson, Devon Achane, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, George Pickens, Dalton Kincaid, and Kyle Pitts. We didn't really talk a lot about Pickens here. I do love 4 games that he played without Deontay Johnson. He had a 28.9% target share. So he was terrific. Anything you want to add about George Pickens? Again, Jamey's breakouts are Richardson, Achane, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, George Pickens, Kincaid, and Pitts. Anything you want to add about Pickens?
I mean, you just see the potential. Again, we've spent a lot of time on this the last few weeks with free agency and the addition of Russell Wilson. And so you can sit here and say Arthur Smith, he was bad for Drake London and how that all unfolded. And I get it. But as a play caller, he was good for A.J. Brown. And so that's when he had a competent quarterback in Ryan Tannehill. And so I would say that he's a competent quarterback in Russell Wilson. You could debate where Russell Wilson is at this point in his career, but he's certainly going to be able to, I think, bring out the best of George Pickens by comparison to what he had over the last 2 seasons. And so now there's an opportunity for him. He was the target leader for the Steelers last year, but part of that was Deontay Johnson missing time. Targets per game, I would assume, favored Johnson. But Pickens now has the opportunity to take a step forward, year 3, in an offense that will hopefully be a little bit more pass happy. I don't expect it to be dramatically more pass happy, but a little bit more pass happy than what we saw last year.
Okay, and Kincaid. So, yeah, go ahead.
You're looking at a Buffalo receiving core right now that's clearly changing. So Gabe Davis is gone, and the addition of Curtis Samuel is a different type of player. And so Kincaid with the first round investment, I got to go back and find this. Somebody tweeted it, and I'm sorry for not giving credit, but there was a stretch of games last year where somebody compared Kincaid and Laporta, and basically the catches and the yards were the same. It was just touchdowns. And so, for a guy that has this pedigree in this opportunity with this quarterback, I think what we're going to see is, the best of Kincaid this year. And what we saw from him last year was when somebody was missing, whether it was Dawson Knox or Gabe Davis, Knox in the middle of the season and Davis at the end of the year, is when his numbers popped and his targets popped. And so both those opportunities are there. Plus you have a disgruntled, aging Stefon Diggs. And so Sean McDermott already kind of said, I think where they're leaning, they may come out of the draft with a wide receiver, but we talked about the receiving group and he threw the 2 tight ends in there. And so I think they're going to be big, focal points of this passing attack, with Kincaid obviously the better pass catcher of the 2. So very excited about him. Like Dave said, I agree wholeheartedly. He's the 5th tight end coming into the season. Wouldn't surprise me if he's better than the 2 other young guys that are going to be drafted ahead of him in Laporta and McBride. I don't expect that to be the case because I love what Laporta showed last year. I think he's going to get better. Love what McBride showed last year as well. That's why I haven't ranked the way I do. But obviously, based on where this guy was expected to produce and how he's, sort of shown flashes of it, the best is yet to come.
If you want to pass the devil horns over here, Adam, I can play devil's advocate against both Pickens and Kincaid.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, let's start with Kincaid. In the last 7 games with Joe Brady, he averaged 5.7 targets per game and under 10 PPR points per game by a lot. It was 8 PPR points per game. You really have to drill down into those games without Dawson Knox to get the best out of Dalton Kincaid. 13.8 PPR points per game, 7.4 targets per game. That's from weeks 8 through 12 when Dawson Knox did not play. There was a bye week in there as well. I'm encouraged by Kincaid making a second-year jump if there's no Gabe Davis and if the Bills don't add somebody with a top 70 pick. Let's call it something like that. I don't know how badly the Bills are going to try and replace Gabe Davis as far as a perimeter receiver, or if they're going to just try and get by with Curtis Samuel in that slot role that he had before with Joe Brady and Khalil Shakir playing outside. And they just might say, okay, we've got Josh Allen. Let him do his thing throwing the football. They also were a little bit more run heavy with Joe Brady calling plays, taking a little bit of work away. That's the devil's advocate case against Kincaid, is that he just doesn't get back to that 7 target per game level. That's what you're looking for from a fantasy tight end. I love the talent. I love that the second year factor, like I said. So I am going to bank on that for now with Dalton Kincaid, but that is the devil's advocate argument against him. With Pickens, look, so much of his fantasy production did come at the end of the year, 18.6 PPR points per game in his final 3 with Mason Rudolph. That includes a game where he had 0 fantasy points. So just on fire in those games. In the last 7 games after Matt Canada got sent packing by the Steelers, 13.1 PPR points per game. We just got done talking about how bad Arthur Smith's offense was for Drake London. Drake London was the number 1 receiver for the Atlanta Falcons. It is clear for now, and it's probably not going to change in the draft, that Pickens is going to be the number 1 wide receiver for the Steelers. And even though it's a better quarterback situation than what Arthur Smith had in Atlanta, it's still not great. And so I love Pickens. I believe I won a lunch bet with Pickens and Deontay Johnson last year that I need to cash in on one of these days. But I am a little bit nervous about Pickens being overdrafted, being taken too close to a ceiling. We talk about that all the time. And just his deficiencies as far as route running goes and not being a complete wide receiver, also holding him back just a little bit from being one of these wide receivers that finishes north of 15 PPR points per game.
I'll just go back to one thing real quick about Arthur Smith with the Falcons, and just from the conversation I had with him last summer in regard to Kyle Pitts. When he had a veteran quarterback that he trusted in Matt Ryan, they threw the ball much more. And so he has, I think a guy that he's going to trust, I would hope, 2 guys I would hope that he trusts more so than he had in Atlanta, and the Steelers had hopefully last year as well. You know, whether it's going to be Russell Wilson the majority of the season or Justin Fields. And so whether that leads to them being upper half of pass attempts, I'd be surprised, because I don't think that's what he wants to do.
No.
But again, maybe closer to the middle. That's, I think, something that could be realistic. And let's not forget, they were 22nd to Falcons in pass attempts last year. We cannot ever forget that.
That's not too bad.
Gross passing yards per game, which means there were actually 10 teams that threw for fewer yards than the Atlanta Falcons. So they weren't as miserable as you thought. No, I mean, yeah, I also, okay. Anyway,
I will say, just as far as the George Pickens upside argument, and this is my favorite new George Pickens stat. He was the 5th player in his age 22 season to average at least 10 yards per target on more than 100 targets.
He is a stud in terms of
the first 4.
Yeah.
Randy Moss, Rob Gronkowski, Josh Gordon, and Odell Beckham.
Yeah, and those guys stink.
Like if Russell Wilson can be just average, Pickens could be a monster.
I've heard this from you before.
Monster.
Oh, I've heard
he wasn't below. Okay, and I don't think Russell Wilson was as bad as everybody else does last year.
Oh no,
but
I'm sorry.
DJ Moore. Okay, yes,
yeah.
No, and like that's fair. I think Russell Wilson has a little better track record than Baker Mayfield did going into that situation. But yeah,
fingers crossed.
But it's also, if Russ fails, there's a pretty good guy behind him too.
Right.
As a thrower,
I mean, he just unlocked
a lot better than
DJ
Kenny
Moore.
Pickett.
I think he can unlock George Pickens too.
Yeah.
Maybe. I think the fact that I think the fact that DJ Moore had such a good season is kind of making Justin Fields a little overrated. There's not really a shred of evidence to say that Justin Fields is a good passer. I mean, his numbers are absolutely horrible.
Have to be a good passer.
Well, maybe not, but if they're not going to throw the ball much, he has to do something good. I mean, Pickens obviously is the kind of guy who can do a lot by himself, right? He can make big plays, but could be very inconsistent. That could be a problem. There in the chat, sometimes I try to pay attention to the chat. Takes my focus away from the show, so that's why I ignore it a lot. I just made a $100 St. Jude donation bet with one of our audience members, one of our viewers, Jeff. He is insisting that Nico Collins will be better than Jamar Chase this year. He was going on about how Nico is better than Jamar Chase. And then he said, why don't they pay attention to the chat? Blah, blah, blah. So I said, okay, Jamar Chase is better than Nico Collins. So he's pretty serious about this. We just made a bet. Losers given $100 to St. Jude. Remind us,
Are there any parameters, injuries, or anything like that?
Yeah, I think we got to talk about Azer stats and all that. I said PPR fantasy points per game. And I would say you only count games where they play 50% or more of the snaps.
Did he ask you to like put the money in escrow after the line shaving debacle?
No.
Oh, that's true.
What line shaving? I thought
you said you would do something and then you didn't do it.
No, I will definitely do that. But I feel pretty good.
That was one of the more disappointing things you've ever done. When you came back with a piece of paper with 3 lines on it, taped it to your head.
Yeah.
I love that it's called a line shaving debacle.
Right, exactly.
The first thought is always like, something really terrible happening in sports where people are saying, nope, we're talking about Adam Azer's hair.
I do want to save time for Dave and Heath's breakouts, obviously, but let me ask you this about Pitts and Kincaid. Are they good enough breakout candidates where we actually shouldn't be taking a top 4 tight end unless it's just silly value?
I think you're looking at, the value of where these guys will probably be drafted. Dave referenced Ingram going after Pitts. I think that's probably realistic because the Pitts hype will start to spiral out of control again if he makes some plays in camp and everything that I'm sure Kirk Cousins and Raheem Morris will say. They're already releasing, hype videos for the Falcons. So they're really excited about the changes in Atlanta, after they started their offseason program this week. So wouldn't surprise me if Pitts maybe gets a little bit too high from an ADP perspective. But I think if the value is right on those 2 guys after the top 4 tight ends, and really Andrews is going to be, I think, the one that swings it. Maybe McBride if he falls behind Andrews. But if you're talking about round 4, round 5 for those guys, and you can get those other 2 guys in Kincaid and Pitts a round or 2 later, 2 rounds later, I would say is probably safe. If they're a round difference, I think you probably want to take a chance on the top 4 guys because they just feel safer.
All right, cool. Let's take a break. We got Dave's breakouts, Zach Moss, Zamir White, and Chris Olave. Definitely need to talk about him. Jaden Reed, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Dave saw Jamey's list, agreed with a lot of it, so he gave me 5 different names. Much appreciated there. And then we'll get to Heath's breakouts as well. And we'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today.
At CBS Sports Golazo Network, we're bringing you the game. Madness of Messi arrives! Breaking down the game.
This is unlike anything else in the world.
And changing the game.
Get it all for nil.
That means free.
Whoa.
And all day long!
24/7.
We're back on Fantasy Football Today, and just going to take a look at a recent draft we did for some reference. Dave probably has it because he has memorized these drafts. But Zach Moss and Zamir White are 2 running backs for Dave that are breakout candidates. And Zach Moss went late round 7 in this draft I'm looking at that we did a few weeks ago. And Zamir White went 3 picks later. So what do you think about, are they that close, Zach Moss and Zamir White?
They are for now, and things can obviously change, especially in Las Vegas. All it takes is 1 draft pick within the first 100 picks of a running back by the Raiders, and Zamir White goes off this list with the quickness. But I do think Zach Moss has a chance to exceed his numbers from last year. Last year was a career best for Zach Moss, almost 1,000 total yards and 7 touchdowns. I think that was the number for Moss in 2022 or 23 rather, excuse me. And we've already talked, as soon as Moss went to Cincinnati and Joe Mixon was out of there, we talked about how Zach Moss, a better version of Joe Mixon, better yards per carry, more explosive, better yards after contact per carry. Like all the things that you look for from a running back, those metrics were good. And so all he has to do is fend off Chase Brown taking over more than the 3rd down role, and he'll be in the exact same spot that Joe Mixon has been in for the last 4 years. And Mixon has averaged at least 15 PPR points per game in that spot. I think Moss could do almost exactly that, like right around 15 PPR points, maybe closer to 14, if he has that role. And that's the if is, well, there's 2 ifs. There's the, can he stay healthy if, and can he keep that role and make sure that Chase Brown doesn't take too much away. But the situation's good. The offensive line should be good enough. And the receivers, assuming T. Higgins stays, will keep the safeties playing back. It just all makes sense for Zach Moss to have his best year ever.
I am a lot more excited right now today about, like, I agree with Dave that if the Raiders take a running back with the top 100 pick, then Zamir White takes a big hit. But right now, I'm quite a bit more excited about Zamir White than I am Zach Moss, just because there's so much less competition. And he was with this coaching staff towards the end of the year last year when Josh Jacobs went down, and they just fed him. And I think this is a team that would love to run the ball 30 or 35 times a game and let their defense win them games. So Zamir White stays healthy and they don't use a top 100 pick. He might be in the top 5 in the NFL in rush attempts this year.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if he'll get that high in rush attempts, but top 10, I think, is certainly within the range of possibilities. But obviously, like you said, he was fed quite a bit, so I guess there is the potential for that. But Moss at his cost right now is fine. I'm so worried about him just being a flash in the pan of the 5 games that we saw last year. And you go back to his time in Buffalo when he was given this opportunity. He was basically the guy that the Bills tried to make their starter. And every time he flopped, whether it was due to injury or poor play, and it was on what was supposed to be a great offense. And it was the same type of system. We talked about this quite a bit, about running out of shotgun and how much this is a similar system to what he was in Buffalo and in Indianapolis. And so, again, round 7, it's hard to, overlook what he can become. And it could just be a 5-game sample size of him staying healthy and being productive and doing all those things before either he gets hurt or Chase Brown maybe takes over. It could be Travion Williams, or they may still add somebody as well, because none of these guys have, at least long-term deals. Chase Brown's not on his rookie deal. But I think from the standpoint of who has more upside, for me, it's Zamir White. And Moss is somebody that, unless it's probably after round 6, I will be avoiding, just because I really fear the potential of him flopping in this opportunity.
And so let's just say that you're in a draft and you end up with Zach Moss and you have that fear of him flopping. Chase Brown went in round 9 in our most recent full PPR mock. You could take him in round 8 if you want to. You could lock up the Bengals backfield with back-to-back picks after 80th overall. That doesn't sound so bad.
I probably would rather have somebody in the Moss pick and then just take Chase Brown.
You could do that too. So who was picked around Moss? Zamir White. So you, as of now, Zamir White and Chase Brown would be your preference.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. So
I don't hate it.
Yeah, Moss. I will point out he also had 4 games at the end of the 2022 season where he did fine. He didn't score a ton of fantasy points because he didn't score in except one of them. And that does kind of, like, if you look at his career, he doesn't catch a lot of passes. I hope that changes.
I also think that the situation in Indianapolis was much better for rushing efficiency than it is in Cincinnati.
Well, why? He wasn't really with Richardson that much. Well,
he wasn't even with him in week 1. That was one.
He wasn't with him in week 1. I just don't think that the Bengals have a good run blocking offensive line or system.
No, but they face
much better talent around him, though.
They face light boxes. This was one of the biggest knocks on Joe Mixon. He had one of the most advantageous rushing situations. Always a light box, one of the highest light box rates, and he was terrible. He just couldn't do.
They didn't have an offensive line that could block a light box.
I mean, did the Colts have like some great offensive line? I don't know that they used to.
Last year, Moss's 8 in the box rate was 14.8%. Mixon's was 15.2%. Both of those were very low. So I feel like it's
Moss's was lower than Mixon's.
Yeah,
he was a lot better. Wasn't he better than Mixon? I mean,
but that's not the reason why. It's not because of both of them were below 3 yards per carry against 8 in the box too.
All right, if you want, let's just see. I don't know the stats here. So run block win rate, the Bengals, according to ESPN, were 9th best. The Colts were 11th. So it looks like they had fairly similar situations. Now, PFF does not grade the Bengals offensive line well.
Right. I say by that one, there's a lot of different offensive line measurements right now, and they don't align very well.
Yeah.
I'm very suspicious.
Same. Okay, let's go to the rest of Dave's breakouts list. Chris Olave, Jaden Reed, and JSN. Olave obviously going to get drafted much earlier. Do you think Chris Olave justifies a 2nd-round pick, Dave?
He almost does by default, because he's one of these young receivers with huge upside. And if you just drill down into the 11 games last year, he had at least 7 targets. He actually had at least 8 targets in those games. It's 17.1 PPR points per game. It could be just as simple as saying, okay, New Orleans doesn't make a big splash in their receiving core. They don't try and lean on the run as much as they did last year. Maybe they don't have Taysom Hill, and that doesn't harpoon half the offense. and Derek Carr stays healthy, Olave could end up having his best year in his third year. And to me, it's just a guy who's got supreme talent, continuing to get opportunities and putting it all together with his quarterback.
Heath, I don't think you're on this one.
No, and I like the talent. It's just with London and with Garrett Wilson, it's very easy to look at the situations and see, look, these are elite wide receivers, and look how much better the situation got for them. We're finally going to get elite production. With Chris Olave, it seems like it's the exact same situation he's been in his entire career, which is fine. Totally. I think he's a low end number 2, and I am kind of surprised that Dave likes him because he was really hit or miss last year. Like, he had a lot of games. You mentioned the games where he had more than 7 targets and he was awesome in those games, but he also had a lot of games with like 45 yards. And so I think you're going to continue to have those in this mediocre Saints offense.
See, that's the one thing though that I'm curious about, is the addition of Clint Kubiak going to make things that much better for everybody. And clearly a lot falls on Derek Carr, and we know how he feels about Derek Carr. Right. So we'll see how things go there in terms of the quarterback play. But I do think a change in play caller matters here. And what we've seen from these San Francisco guys, and that's where Kubiak is coming from, and obviously he has his father's pedigree as well, is the ability to get these guys out in space and make plays after the catch, yards after catch. And Olave now, for what it's worth, I know Michael Thomas has missed a ton of time, but this is a receiving core that's missing guys. I'll go back to what Dennis Allen said at the owners meetings in the takeaway we had, in that they're looking to add a pass catcher, not necessarily a wide receiver. So does that mean a tight end? Does that mean another pass catching running back? Or does it mean another wide receiver? And so right now they're starting wide receivers. Their top 3 guys are Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, and Cedric Wilson. So it's a pretty clear path to him dominating targets if he plays the way he's capable of playing. So I do think that there is a chance for a guy going into year 3, who's shown some very impressive flashes, to take that step forward. But you are, again, asking Derek Carr at this point in his career to do that. And that's really, I think, the only drawback. But, you look at where these San Francisco guys have gone, and again, I'll reference Nico Collins. Year 3, he goes to a situation where they just open up the offense. And hopefully the same thing happens with, Kubiak's system. So I'm excited about Olave. I do think, and we spent some time talking about it, feels like you're settling for him in round 2 because of what he's done, and it's people like us that continue to prop him up to whatever degree, based on talent or opportunity or all these things. But at some point, if it does click, you're going to be pretty thrilled about what he can become. And I think this is the year that's going to happen.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to comment on something. Someone wrote in the comments that they like Jamey's breakout list a little better than Dave's, but I just want to point out again, Dave, he gave different names. He said he agreed with a lot of what was on Jamey's list. Jamey responded first, so Dave was just giving some kind of deeper names.
I just gave a list that included Jamey's guys, so I did not care.
Right, and the whole point of this is just to come up with candidates anyway. So it's not like I'm saying, oh, Garrett Wilson's going to suck. He's not a breakout. It's not that. It's just these are talking points of players that could have a career.
I can't believe you like Zach Moss more than Bijan Robinson.
I know, I'm an idiot.
And for anybody that wants more of this, I'm writing the first version of Sleepers, Breakouts, and Busts this week. So Sleepers are on the site already. Breakouts will be on by the end of the day today, and Busts tomorrow.
All right, Olave. I just want to point something out with Olave. He has been among wide receivers 16th in yards per game, both of his NFL seasons. So that's with one year, his rookie year, a really bad. I'm just gonna say based on total numbers that they didn't throw a lot. They threw for hardly any yards. He was 16th in yards per game. Last year they threw a lot more. They weren't as efficient, but they threw a lot more. They had more yards. He was 16th in yards per game. That's better than Garrett Wilson's been. That's better than Drake London's been. But at least it tells you that he's got a path to being a top 15 receiver at worst, but he just doesn't score touchdowns. And so far, it reminds me a lot of Terry McLaurin. That Chris Olave does not get red zone targets. He does not get green zone targets. I don't really know how to project that, but so far through 2 seasons, he has something like 20 red zone targets in 2 seasons. That's terrible. So,
and again, going back to the Carr situation, it's hard to expect a big change in the touchdown numbers playing with a quarterback who's only thrown more than 28 touchdown passes once in his career. Like, you're asking him to have 40% of his team's receiving touchdowns. We talked about this with DJ Moore when he used to never score more than 4. Well, the team never threw more than 20. it's more difficult to have, like, we could see Aaron Rodgers throw 35 touchdown passes, even if he's just mediocre in terms of everything else. It's hard to expect that from the Saints.
Yeah, just like 8 touchdowns would be really good for Olave. He has 9 in 2 seasons.
You brought up something early, Adam, which I think makes sense. When you get past really the AJ Brown, Puka, Wilson receiving, line, you want to call it, that's where the cutoff starts. Then it's that mixed bag of guys, with the 2 older receivers, which I think will be the only 2. I guess you could throw Mike Evans in there. It's hard to discount what he's done. So, Evans, Diggs, and Adams, and the 2 49ers guys. For me, Nico Collins, I think a lot of us probably feel the same way. And I'll put London in there, but that's kind of where Olave should belong. He sort of goes in that next group. Not necessarily should be in the first group, which is where he was being drafted last year, and that was a mistake.
Okay. And Jaden Reed and JSN, Dave, are a couple of breakout candidates for you. Who do you like better?
JSN is kind of one of those shrug your shoulders guys and say, well, he can't be any worse than he was last year going into his second season in Seattle. Say that 10 times fast. I'm hoping that he can takes a lot of targets away from Lockett, a few away from DK, be a factor in the red zone, and be finally worth the ADP, because it's been nothing but projection ever since Seattle drafted him. Reed is someone that I fell in love with during the draft process. His last 8 games, plenty of touchdowns, still 17.4 PPR points per game. His targets cratered in week 18 and then through the playoffs. I think he was playing hurt. And overall on the season, 13.6 PPR points per game. You've heard me talk about how Jordan Love was a great quarterback and really did well regardless of who was on the field. I think this is his best wide receiver. And Reed playing in the slot, not a high ADOT, but someone who can make plays after the catch. I think he can come back and maybe flirt with 15 PPR points per game. And we're drafting him in our drafts kind of in the same range. He's going like the ADP overall in our PPR drafts is very similar between him and Christian Kirk and George Pickens and DeAndre Hopkins. And ultimately, I expect most of those guys to go ahead of Jaden Reed. I love the idea of trying to get Reed as my number 3 receiver. And if I have to settle for him as my number 2, it might make me gross out a little bit, but it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up finishing as a top 24 type of wide receiver, if not top 20.
What is a good, you might know this better than I do. What's a good target per route run rate?
20% or more, I think is the number. Heath might be able to speak to that better than I.
Well, I think that good, that word good, like, I don't know. That's certainly not elite. It's certainly not really good.
No,
that might be like a baseline for being a fantasy starter.
I'll go ahead and all right.
Whoa!
What's whoa?
Stefon Diggs has been traded to the Houston Texans.
No.
Are you kidding me?
What day is it? It's not April 1st.
No,
this is from Adam Schefter.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm going to go ahead and take Tank Dell off of my breakouts list. You can remove Tank Dell from my breakouts list. And I think that you just won the Nico Collins.
Kane is number 1 tight end in fantasy right now.
Oh my gosh.
I know. I'm on the air.
Is Josh Allen QB1 still?
No, but CJ Stroud might be.
CJ Stroud is going straight up.
He was on my breakouts list. Yes.
Wow. Win. Yes.
Easiest CJ Stroud breakout case ever.
And now you can say goodbye to Nico Collins being as good as he was last year.
So what's your guess on draft pick compensation here? 1 second.
Let me see what they have.
They just got
they got a ton of picks from Minnesota in that deal.
By the way, I think the Nico Collins versus Jamar Chase bet is going to have to.
You just won. Congratulations.
That was the fact. Just send the money in now, Jeff. Houston has 2 second-round picks, 42 and 59. 1 third-round pick, that's 86.
There's no way they give up a first for him, future first.
Oh, I don't know if they gave up a future first. I'll predict one of the 2s and one of the 4s.
Yeah, I would say at best.
I'm going to go less than that. Under.
Yeah, I would say under 2, yeah.
But you kind of saw this coming, right? Just the way that the season ended and Diggs just kind of I thought I could see this coming.
Can we go back to the sleepers thing and put Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel back?
Man, that was a great sleeper pick for me too. I'm crushing it this week.
Adam is stunned right now. He can't speak.
There we
Adam
go.
is still recording.
You got me. Okay, sorry, you guys got me now. We good?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. All right, let's talk about this. Who's the best? Who's the best Texans wide receiver right now, and do any of them belong in the second round?
I'm going to say Diggs and no.
I'll say Nico and no.
I'll say Nico and no too.
How early are we talking? Top 30 pick?
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
For Nico or for Diggs?
Whoever.
I mean, everybody will take Nico ahead of Diggs. And I don't
think everybody will. I think we'll still see ADP favor Diggs.
Because it's the name, you know.
Yeah. I'll go Nico 25 to 30, Diggs 31 to 36.
It's probably a good range.
Do you have the projections yet, Heath?
And what about
I do not.
What about Tank Dell?
Oh man, this crushes him.
Gonna be great value.
This is your fault, by the way. You with the stupid April Fool's joke.
What? How does this have anything? Oh yeah, it was about Tank Dell. That's right. Okay, so CJ Stroud or
Josh Allen.
CJ Stroud or Josh Allen.
Oh man.
I mean, Allen was fine last year when Diggs was brutal.
Doesn't matter. It's still a threat of Diggs. Their receiving core is brutal right now.
No, Khalil Shakir,
man.
Obviously, they're gonna draft a wide receiver. I mean, there's no chance they're not drafting a wide receiver.
Of course, or they're trading for T. Higgins.
Oh yeah, that could happen.
They're gonna run the ball 550 times.
Tyler Boyd probably signing in Buffalo.
CJ Stroud or Josh Allen right now?
Allen. You can't get too carried away.
Probably Allen.
Like, can you put Stroud ahead of Dak?
Easy.
I don't know.
I had him ahead of Dak anyway.
I didn't.
Nobody.
I'm taking him over Burrow.
That was my next question. Yeah, Burrow, Lamar Jack.
Stroud is now QB4.
Wow.
So that's ahead.
4, 5. Sorry, 5.
5. Okay.
Me oh my. Heath, CJ Stroud was one of your breakouts.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, with this receiving core, how could he not be?
2 second-round picks from 2025.
No.
Oh, wow.
A 2025 seconds, what they got?
Oh, I'm sorry. In exchange for a package of picks, including a second round from 2025.
So that means the best pick is the second-round pick in 2025?
Oh, here it is. Bills receive 2025 second-round pick from Minnesota. So whatever trade that was from, probably the Diggs trade, I guess. Texans receive Stefon Diggs, a 2024 sixth-round pick, and a 2025 fifth-round pick. So he just went for a second-round pick.
Slightly less, yeah.
For next year.
I wonder if you don't trade great receivers for that return. So I wonder if there's a consensus, at least between
Randy Moss went for a
teams.
Once upon a time.
What did DeAndre Hopkins go for? Or AJ Brown?
Brown went for a first.
Well, Brown went for a first, but and he had to be paid. So that's not even in the same stratosphere.
Well,
this also is factoring in Diggs' contract too. So you have to give Trey's contract.
Yeah. By the way, the second round pick that they're getting was the one that Houston just acquired from Minnesota in the trade that gave Minnesota Houston's first round pick a couple weeks ago.
No, it's an awesome trade for Houston. And my guess is that they're just going to they'll probably use Diggs all over the place. They'll keep Nico on the perimeter and they'll use Tank Dell. They'll line up Tank Dell all over the place, but try and take shots with him.
Man, I was so excited about Noah Brown.
Is good or bad for Joe Mixon?
It's both.
Yeah, it's good.
It's good because I don't know how defenses are going to stack that box ever. We just got done talking about how bad he was, 2.3 yards per carry against 8 in the box last year. But it's bad because now there's a lot of mouths to feed. And I don't know if Diggs is as good as he once was. His hands probably are. But
remember when this division was going to be Jacksonville's for the next 5 years?
Oh boy. I mean, this is a lot to digest here. So would you take Mike Evans or Mike Evans or a Texans receiver?
Evans.
Yeah, Evans.
I'll take 2 Texans receivers.
Okay. And would you take Tank Dell or JSN Jaden Reed?
Dell.
I think I'll land on Dell over Reed.
Reed last year was bad when Watson was healthy. That's the problem.
I never got to go through my my target per route run rate, but for Jaden Reed, it was when Christian Watson was out weeks 1 through 3, 27.4% target. You know what? I'll tell you just what he was on pace for in terms of targets in 17 games. That might be easier for people. Weeks 1 through 3 without Watson, on pace for 113 targets. Weeks 4 through 13 with Watson, on pace for 83 targets. Weeks 14 through 18, he missed one of those games, on pace for 128 targets. Absolutely massive difference when Watson was in the playing and versus not playing. That's Jaden Reed. I'm not sure if there's anything else you guys want to say about the Stefon Diggs trade. We didn't talk about James Cook, but it's obviously the Bills roster is so incomplete right now. So a lot to be determined there.
The CJ Stroud just went from incomplete to on the quarterback rating scale for CBS.
And Heath, I honestly don't think we need to talk about your breakouts. Oh, you could Breece Hall. You want to talk about him? Because your breakouts are Stroud, Richardson, Breece Hall, Bijan.
Breece Hall should have been in the group breakouts. We all have Breece Hall as a breakout.
Except wasn't he like the number 2 running back in fantasy last year?
I think he broke out last year.
So he may not have been that high per game, but
I don't think it was that high.
Okay. Overall, Breece Hall was number two overall and number 6 per game. I could buy it though. 17 points per game. He could crush that.
Oh, I think he could. He is by far the most likely back, not named Christian McCaffrey, to be the number 1 running back in fantasy this year.
Sure.
And I took him in a draft that I think we may have done it on the air, or we talked about it on the air. I took him 2nd overall, I think, and people didn't agree with that. So they wanted the receivers there. So do you take the receivers or do you take Breece Hall?
Hall.
In what format? I'm sorry.
PPR league.
Hall or which receivers?
Any receiver. Your number 1 receiver.
Oh, so this is something I struggled with because I did that in one of the drafts, and Zach posted it on Instagram. I was very surprised with all the reaction. I think the receivers make more sense just from the standpoint of what happens in round 2, because you can't get a very safe and receiver that has as much upside as any of your favorite top 4 guys. Whereas in round 2, you might be able to get Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, James Cook, Isaiah Pacheco, Rashad White, all those guys. I just think it's a better draft strategy. So while Breece Hall has a higher ceiling than those guys, I think the pairing is better of going with those elite wide receivers and the running back in round 2 if you want to go the hero RB route.
All right, we're going to end the show here. Dave hopped off to do some HQ. Heath and I are going to do FFT in 5. We'll talk about the Diggs trade there. Jamey's going to do something, I'm sure. And we will talk to you tomorrow with our 2024 early busts list. And again, you can check out the content on the website as Jamey's writing up the articles. We'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.